Hey guys, it's Baylor Leisure, and for the first time in a long time, or at least a little while, I'm doing a hockey video. This week, April 10th, I believe, the 2019 Stanley Cup Playoffs will begin, and here is my predictions on the first round matchups in the 2019. So let's start off in the Eastern Conference. It will be the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Tampa Bay Lightning had an historic season. I believe that their point total was just a point or two back from the record, which was set by the 1995-96 Detroit Red Wings. A team has so much scoring. Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, great goaltending, and Andrei Vasilevsky. I mean, they're probably the most complete team in these playoffs. And they're definitely heavy favorites in the Eastern Conference to make it to the Stanley Cup Final. They were probably the favorites last year when they were very aggressive at the trade deadline, but unfortunately they lost in a series that they were, not heavily favored, but pretty favored against the Washington Capitals, a team on a destiny. But unfortunately, they had a 3-2 lead and lost on home ice in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference. They're looking to bounce back this year. On the other side of things, you have the Columbus Blue Jackets, who were one of the most aggressive teams at the trade deadline this year, going out and getting Matt Duchene. I mean, Artemi Panarin, one of the best goal scorers. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's a great goaltender, but he's had his troubles in the postseason. The Columbus Blue Jackets have never won a first round, and this is obviously not going to be easy to win a first round this year. I think even in their history, I don't think they've won 3 games in a first round either. So they got a lot of pressure on them. Kind of similar to what the Washington Capitals had last year, not making it past the second round in 20 years. But the Columbus Blue Jackets, I think after being that aggressive and they just snuck into the postseason as a wild card team, this is a team that's, got a lot of work ahead of them if they want to make it past the first round for the first time in their franchise history. So, I believe this is going to be a really close matchup, or at least somewhat competitive, but I think just Tampa Bay, just having Stamkos, Kucherov, and all those big guys, I just think that's going to be too much for the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think that's going to be too much for Bobrovsky to handle, and I think the Tampa Bay Lightning win the series in 6. Moving on to the Boston Bruins versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, a rematch of last year's first round Eastern Conference matchup where that series went to 7 games. A little bit disappointing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but this is another series that, I think Boston's had Toronto's number over the years in the playoffs. I think the expectation for Toronto is to obviously get past the first round, make a contendership for the Stanley Cup Final, as it is for both teams. But definitely more so for Toronto after being probably the winners of the offseason, getting John Tavares. And I gotta say, Toronto has not been as good as advertised. Even with, Nylander and Austin Matthews and Tavares and all those stars, they haven't. I expected them to probably be the top team in the Eastern Conference this year, but they were not. Boston, I think, has experience over Toronto. I think they have home ice advantage, which is a big advantage. They're the second seed in the Eastern Conference, and I kind of think that's going to be a big difference. I think the Bergerons, the Marchands, all those guys for the Bruins, I think they're going to make a big difference in the series. I think this is going to be another one of those, it's going to go down to the wire. I think this will be a 7-game series. But because of home ice advantage, I give slight advantage to the Boston Bruins to win this series. The Washington Capitals versus the Carolina Hurricanes. The Washington Capitals last year finally got the big monkey off their back. Made it past the second round for the first time in 20 years. Got to the Stanley Cup Final for only the second time in their franchise history, and they won that illustrious cup that had been eluding Ovechkin for all of his career, and finally breaking that 42-year drought in the franchise history, winning their first Stanley Cup. They're looking to probably create maybe the next dynasty in the National Hockey League. They're as advertised, Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, TJ Oshie, Backstrom, all those big scorers for the Capitals. Facing a team that probably the biggest surprise in the National Hockey League this season, the Carolina Hurricanes, who had not made the postseason, I think, in about a decade. This was a team that, honestly, I think probably they're pretty noteworthy for their their off ice after winning on home ice, their big celebrations, which have gotten a kind of a mixed reaction. But honestly, I kind of love them. I don't think you see that team celebration that you see in hockey. You see it in football all the time, and that can be sometimes that can be a little bit tiresome. Sometimes it is entertaining, but it's good to see that in a sport like hockey. This is a fun team to watch, and a lot of credit goes to coaching Rod Brindamore, former Carolina Hurricane player. Had a very long career in the National Hockey League. Much credit to him. I think I think the Hurricanes put a little, they have the potential to test the Capitals, but I think the Capitals just have too much star power with Ovechkin, just have a lot more experience. And I think out of all the series in the first round in the Eastern Conference, this is probably the advantage goes to the Capitals. I think they win in 5 games. And then you have the New York Islanders versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, the New York Islanders are another one of those big surprises. I think after losing John Tavares, a lot of people thought they would not be as good. But a lot of credit goes to Barry Trotz and who won the Stanley Cup last year with the Washington Capitals. And he brought a lot of defensive structure to that team that they desperately needed. And it's helped them out a lot. I think that obviously the big leaders for the Islanders, even after losing Tavares, Matthew Barzal, he's really been that big star player for the New York Islanders. Brock Nelson, another big player for them. The Islanders, they're coming in, and they were one of the better teams in the National Hockey League this season. And then you have the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have kind of dropped off a little bit this year. Yes, they made the playoffs, but not as good as what people thought. I think Jack Johnson's, who was a big signing for them, has not done as well. But even still with that, Pittsburgh still has a lot of power, star power. They still have Sidney Crosby. They still have Evgeny Malkin. They have Phil Kessel. So, I think a big thing that's going to come down in this series, goaltending, is Matt Murray going to outduel the Islander goaltending. So I think that's going to be a big key matchup to watch. I think this is another series that will go the distance, like Boston versus Toronto. I'm going to give the slight advantage to the New York Islanders because I think defensively they're a much better team than the Pittsburgh Penguins are right now. And then moving on to the Western Conference. First matchup, I'm going to look at the Nashville Predators versus the Dallas Stars. Nashville, I think this is where their window could be closing a little bit. But I think honestly, the Western Conference is a lot more open than the Eastern Conference. And you know what? I think they have a good chance of getting back to the Stanley Cup final. I think a big key is going to be Pecorine, their goaltender. He obviously led them to the Stanley Cup final a couple years ago, but unfortunately could not do that last year. They were eliminated by the Winnipeg Jets. So I think he's definitely going to be a key player to look out for. Ryan Johansson, obviously, Roman Josi, Philippe Forsberg. Those are going to be the key players for the Nashville Predators. For the Dallas Stars, I think the 2 players everybody's going to be looking at is going to be, I think it's probably going to be Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. Those are going to be the 2 big players. I think goaltending, Ben Bishop, he's dealt with some injuries. If he's going to be ready to play. So I think that's going to be the key matchup. I think Nashville, there's just too much star power. I think they just have a lot more depth than the Dallas Stars. And this might be a kind of a bold statement, but I'm going to take the Nashville Predators. I think they win in a sweep over the Dallas Stars. And then another probably the biggest surprise in the Western Conference this year, the Calgary Flames. They not only were able to turn around and turn into a playoff team, they were the best team in the Western Conference this year. I think that was definitely a thing that caught me off guard. With them. Obviously, a big leader in that are probably the young players, Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk. Those were definitely the big players for them. Elias Lindholm, Mark Giordano. Those were some definitely big player. I think a key will be definitely the goaltenders. Who's Calgary going to start? Is it going to be David Riddick, or Mike Smith? If those goaltenders, I think those are going to be the 2 key matchups for the Calgary Flames of who's going to start. I would think it's going to be Riddick, but if he struggles early on, expect Mike Smith to come in. They're going up against the Calgary Flames team the Colorado Avalanche. That's the team they're playing. I think, they have the best first line in hockey, and, Gabriel Landeskog and, Nathan McKinnon. Those are the 2 top players in the National Hockey League. They have great goaltending in Philip Grubauer, but I think that's the big kind of disadvantage that they have is just depth. That first line is they're so dependent on that first line. They have some other great players, but I think there's so much emphasis on McKinnon and that first line. So and their goaltenders. But I think this is a series that is pretty competitive. But I think the Calgary Flames, I think they have a little bit more depth, and I will take them over the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games. And then the Winnipeg Jets, probably going into the season, were probably one of the favorites to go to the Stanley Cup Final after making a surprise run to the Western Conference Finals last year when they lost to an expansion team in 5 games, which was the Vegas Golden Knights. I think a big emphasis on the Winnipeg Jets is goaltending again. Connor Hellebuyck, he's one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League, and I think there's definitely going to be a lot of emphasis on him. I think obviously you look at scoring, Blake Wheeler, Kyle Connor, Patrick Laine, if I'm saying that correctly. I think those are going to be the key players to look out for in this series. And then you have a team like St. Louis who definitely turned it around after just missing the postseason. I think they were able to stay a lot more healthier in this season, which was kind of a thing that made them miss the postseason last year. I think an emphasis, the players to look out for that is Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko, David Perron, Braden Shin, and the goaltending. I mean, this was a big story here, was Jake Allen, who kind of struggled. The guy who was able to turn it around and kind of surprise people was Jordan Binnington, and that was definitely a big surprise right there. I think St. Louis, they've been playing, even though Winnipeg's probably is a higher seed, I believe, St. Louis is probably coming in a lot more hot than the Winnipeg Jets did, especially that last week in the regular season. I think this is a series that goes the distance, but honestly, I think St. Louis is the hotter team right now. Even though goaltender's pretty similar, I think the St. Louis Blues, I think they have a little bit of advantage in the star power, and I think Jordan Binnington, he's coming in playing very well. Connor Hellebuyck, I think, is playing very well as well, excuse me. But I think I'm going to give the slight advantage to the St. Louis Blues. This is really a coin flip, but I'll take the Blues just by a hair in 7 games. And then probably the tightest series in this postseason, in my opinion, the San Jose Sharks versus the Vegas Golden Knights. This was obviously a rematch from last year's second round Western Conference matchup, in which the Vegas Golden Knights, on a hot streak, took that series in 6 games. That's a team that's probably a little bit more star power as far as forwards are concerned. Obviously, Mark Stone, who was the big acquisition, he's produced very well for them. Obviously, you look at Max Pacioretty, Jonathan Marchessault. I still can't believe Florida gave up on him. So I think those are going to be the key forwards to watch. Marc-Andre Fleury is just getting healthy. He was able to come back prior to the regular season ending, so that's going to be huge. He's going to be looked at once again for the Vegas Golden Knights. And then San Jose, I think they're another team that went out and was very aggressive in the offseason, getting Erik Karlsson as a rental before he cashes in free agency. Obviously they have him, Brett Burns, Logan Couture, Joe Pavelski, Thomas Hertl. Both teams very loaded when it comes to star power in this series. Obviously, goaltending Martin Jones. So yeah, those are the key components you have right there. I think this is going to be a very tight matchup. Probably the tightest in the postseason, and this series could potentially be a bloodbath. I think this is another one of those coin flip things. And honestly, I think San Jose has a little bit more star power with players like Evander Kane and Karlsson and Thomas and Logan Couture. Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty and Marchessault are big players for them. But I think San Jose just has a little bit more star power, and I'm going to take the Sharks to win this series. I think we'll win in the first round of the 2019 Stanley Cup Playoffs. Leave in the comments section below. Please like the video and subscribe if you'd like the content on my channel. And as always, follow me on Twitter at BabyLeisure96. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you all later.